Hey guys, Varun here. In this video, we'll be creating a payment app using Flutter, Firebase Cloud Functions, and Stripe. First, let's get over some requirements to make this app. We'll need Firebase Blaze Plan to make external calls to Stripe. We'll need a Stripe account with the API keys. And lastly, we'll need Node.js to make our server-side functions. First, let's import our packages and set up our main.dart. We'll need the HTTP package and Flutter Stripe package in our pubspec.yaml, which we can import later in our main.dart. After installing your dependencies, go to your main.dart and import the required packages. In your main function, set your Stripe publishable key using the Flutter Stripe package and apply its settings. For now, that's all we have to set up in regards to the Flutter Stripe package. I'm just going to create a simple UI here which I'll use to demonstrate how this app works, but feel free to make any UI you want and integrate it with your own systems like a cart or a direct product page. I'm just going to create a simple UI with a button in the center of the screen, which I'll use later to call the Firebase function. The Flutter Stripe package also has some additional requirements in case of both Android and iOS. For Android, go to your build.gradle and set your Kotlin version to 1.5. Next, you'll also need to go in the build.gradle of your app folder and set the minimum SDK to 21. Note, this app will not work on any Android version before that, as the Flutter Stripe package does not support it. Lastly, you'll need to go to your main activity.kotlin file and change your Flutter activity to Flutter fragment activity. And those are all the requirements for Android. For iOS, the Flutter Stripe package has one major requirement, that being your app should target any iOS version 11 or greater. To set your iOS version, go to your iOS folder and then go to your pod file. There you can find your platform that your app is currently targeting and change it to anything 11 or greater in order for the Flutter Stripe package to work. Next, let's initialize and deploy our Firebase function. First, let's use the Firebase login command in order to authenticate our Firebase account. Then we can run Firebase init to choose the service we want to use. In our case, we'll only be using the functions. So let's go ahead and select that. After choosing Cloud Functions, we'll be given an option to choose between JavaScript and TypeScript. We'll choose JavaScript. We will not be using ESLint for this tutorial, and yes, we'll install our npm packages now. After installing your npm packages, make sure to go to your functions directory as a new directory will be created. There, install the Stripe package which we'll use to communicate with Stripe from our backend. After installing Stripe, go to your index.js and import your Stripe and secret key. Then let's create a HTTPS on request function and use a try and catch block to catch any errors. We'll create a variable called customer ID in which we'll store the identity of the customer. We'll go through all the customers via the email sent by the client, and if the customer exists, we will set that ID to our customer ID variable. If the customer does not exist, we'll create a new customer and set its ID to our customer ID variable. Then we'll create an ephemeral key, which is a temporary secret key for that specific customer. Next, let's create a payment intent in which we'll use the amount passed in from the client as well as the currency and the customer ID. This way, the payments are linked to the customer and can be looked back at any time. Lastly, we'll send a response if everything is successful, and all of these values are required in order to use the Flutter Stripe package on our client side. If we catch any error, we'll also send a response and we'll set our success to false. In order to deploy our functions, first let's go to our functions directory and run firebase deploy only functions. After running our functions, we'll be able to call our function from the client side. After the deploy is successful, go to the Firebase functions console and copy the request URL. Finally, let's call our function from the client side and make a payment. We'll create a new method inside our payment page called initPaymentSheet and pass in the email and the amount and use a try and catch block to catch any errors. Next, make a HTTP post request to the Firebase Cloud function and store its response in a variable. In this case, I'm storing a response in a JSON response variable, and that way I can access the individual's fields. Then using our Flutter Stripe package, we can call the init payment sheet and fill in the required variables. After filling in the required variables, there are just some more things we need to do. First, we'll just present the payment sheet, and if the payment sheet is successful, we'll just say a payment complete snack bar, and if there's any kind of error, we'll just use the catch and see if it's a stripe exception. If it's a stripe exception, we'll just use a snack bar to show the error as well, and if it is an unknown error, we'll also have a snack bar to show that error. Then we'll go down to our button we created earlier and make it so that we call the init payment sheet and pass in the required variables. In this case, it's the email and amount. We are finally done with the app, and here is a small demo on how the app works. I want to buy a laptop for $2,000, and when I click the button, it will show a payment sheet where I can just input the test card number. That's just 4 twos all along, and I can pay. I can also save the cards for future payments, as you can see, and once the order is done processing, as you can see, the payment is completed. Now if I try to pay again, as the card is saved, I can directly choose that card instead of adding a new card or inputting the card details again, and the payment is completed. And lastly, if I cancel the payment after initiating the payment sheet, it will just say payment has been cancelled. And that's it, guys. Everything is done. Thanks for watching the video, and please do leave some feedback in the comment section.